Welcome to Midweek Bible Study. We are beginning in Acts chapter 15, and you'll recall from last week that we talked about the Jerusalem Council, the division over the Judaizing teachers, and then the Jerusalem decree that came from that. So we're ready for verse 30 in Acts chapter 15 here as Paul continues his ministry. Remember, they're now in the city of Antioch, which is located in Syria. Now, there is another Antioch that's been mentioned in Paul's missionary journey, but that is in the area of Pisidia. So they are there in Syria, staying in Antioch, and they decide that they're going to go back and revisit many of those congregations that they have helped to establish. So beginning in verse 30, it says this: So when they were sent off, they came to Antioch, and when they had gathered the multitude together, they delivered the letter. When they had read it, they rejoiced over its encouragement. This is from the Jerusalem Council, the Jerusalem decree, this letter that's being spoken of. Now Judas and Silas, themselves being prophets also, exhorted and strengthened the brethren with many words. And after they had stayed there for a time, they were sent back with greetings from the brethren to the apostles. So you see here, some time has passed since the first missionary journey was concluded by Paul, and now we see that there's going to be encouragement that's going on. I think this underscores for us the fact that Paul, in his mission, strengthened as well as established. So he would go about making converts and establishing congregations, and then he would return to strengthen. And I think that's so important for us today to realize that when we have someone who is a new convert, a new babe in Christ, that we don't leave them there, that we continue to exhort, encourage, and strengthen. Paul understood the importance of that. However, it seemed good to Silas to remain there. Paul and Barnabas also remained in Antioch, teaching and preaching the word of the Lord with many others also. So they continue that work there in Syrian Antioch. Now, you'll recall back in Acts 13:13, there was some controversy between Paul and John Mark, as John Mark departed their company during that first missionary journey, and Paul isn't ready to trust him again. Barnabas, however, the son of encouragement, who's also a cousin of John Mark, wishes to include him in this revisiting of congregations. And so there's going to be a sharp contention. And this isn't over a doctrinal matter. This is perhaps a very personal disagreement. Verse 36 says, Then after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, Let us now go back and visit our brethren in every city where we have preached the word of the Lord and see how they are doing. Now, there's that emphasis on making sure that the new converts are growing and being strengthened. Now, Barnabas was determined to take with them John called Mark, but Paul insisted that they should not take with them the one who had departed from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. Then the contention became so sharp that they parted from one another. And so Barnabas took Mark and sailed to Cyprus. But Paul chose Silas and departed, being commended by the brethren to the grace of God. And he went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. So here you have a sharp contention between Paul and John Mark, and it causes a rift here with Barnabas. And so these two groups of men go in separate directions. Isn't it interesting how that the gospel is still being furthered, even though there is a personal contention amongst these men? It also humanizes for us these men. We tend to think about them as doing great work on these missionary journeys as recorded in Acts, but they're also still very human in that they have disagreements and they're trying to work through those disagreements. We do know that Paul and John Mark would be reconciled in places like Colossians 4:10, and in Philemon we see that Paul commends the work that John Mark would eventually do. So at some point they're able to set aside their contention. We keep right on reading into chapter 16, and we're going to meet Timothy. So you've got Barnabas and John Mark who have gone to Cyprus, the island nation. That was kind of the first leg of the missionary journey that Paul had taken. And then you have Paul and Silas who are going into the mainland and inland regions of Pisidia and Pamphylia, where they had gone during their first missionary journey. And that was probably, there's probably been a space of about 5 years since that's happened as we read through that missionary journey. And so they're going to meet one named Timothy. And Timothy is going to become instrumental in this. It says, Then he came to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple was there named Timothy, the son of a certain Jewish woman who believed, but his father was Greek. Now, this is kind of unpack that sentence there. Timothy is a Jew, but he's an uncircumcised Jew because his father is a Greek. And so Timothy is going to be really an interesting choice here for them to take with them, because he's going to have the connection with both Jewish heritage and Greek heritage. He probably speaks some Greek, and it's going to be someone who is going to be able to further the gospel cause. He was well spoken of by the brethren who were at Lystra and Iconium. Paul wanted to have him to go on with him, and he took him and circumcised him because of the Jews who were in that region, for they all knew that his father was Greek. Now, I want you to understand here something. Paul is not contradicting the Jewish decree, or the decree from Jerusalem that came out of that Jerusalem council that we just read about in chapter 15. The reason he's doing this, the reason he's performing a circumcision for Timothy, is not for his salvation, but it is so he would not be hindered working among the Jews in the synagogue. He has a Jewish mother and a Greek father, and his circumcision is important for his acceptance into that culture so that he could do good work. Now, we're going to see later men like Titus, who is a Gentile, is not circumcised. And this is done not for salvation, but it's done just so that he doesn't have some sort of hindrance in spreading the gospel. And as they went through the cities, they delivered to them the decrees to keep, which were determined by the apostles and elders at Jerusalem. So the churches were strengthened in the faith and increased in number daily. So I think the main thing to recognize here is that Paul realized the value of first going out and preaching the gospel, but then he also understood the importance of going back and checking on them and strengthening them and encouraging them. And that's a model for church growth and Christian personal growth that we need to embrace today. That we not only are interested in getting someone to the point of baptism, but we're also there to encourage and exhort and to check on them. We'll stop there and pick up next week with Acts 16, verse 6.